marula or other fruit they can store. So when they fall on the ground, she picks them up, puts them in the bag, and takes them home. If you add it all up over the 4-month season, it's about 6 days of labor. On average, it's about like half an hour a day. So you can see that from a profit perspective, that is much more profitable than her maize. Okay. Right, so that's just setting the scene. So obviously, you guys know agriculture is the basis of our food security in Zimbabwe, and it's definitely not looking particularly healthy at the moment. We've got a lot of threats. Climate change is a very obvious one, and I think, as you all know, we're about to head into a real humdinger of a drought. So this is going to become a very topical issue for us. Biodiversity loss. I think these pictures are also very familiar to you. I'm looking around my home in Kristenbank, just north of Harare. It's quite depressing to see the biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, which goes with it. And then, of course, and a slightly different angle, but it's still a real problem in Zimbabwe, is the double burden of malnutrition, which is when malnutrition and obesity coexist side by side. And the reason for that is quite simple. It's that that's kind of the diet that we used to eat. That's the diet that we now eat. And that's the diet that we aspire to eat. And as you can see, there's not a lot of nutrition in that. We used to eat seasonal food from a wide variety of different sources. A wonderful book. Any of you guys ever passing through Gweru, do yourself a favor and stop at Mambo Press, I think it's called there, or Baobab Books, I forget the name of it, publishing house there. There's a book by a woman called Margaret Treadgold, and the book is called Food Plants of Zimbabwe, and it's got 240 different species of indigenous food plants, 90% of which nobody today can even really remember eating. So agriculture is obviously a victim of climate change. The changing climatic conditions are the ones that are leading to drought and that are causing so many problems, but it's also a driver. In fact, it's the leading driver. So it's a cause. So it's a problem, and we have to solve it. And you guys are in the agricultural sector, and you all recognize it. What we're doing right now, it can't last. It's utterly unsustainable. And anyone that tells you otherwise is just burying their head in the sand or owns a seed company. Hands up who owns a seed company. Okay, all right. I know there are people that come to this that do. So on the positive side, there are some things that are changing. And I think the changing climatic conditions is driving that. So firstly, this. I'm sure you all have opinions on this. I'm sure you all have opinions on both what it means and the way that it's implemented, and I don't propose to discuss that. But the one thing I think we can all agree is that this focus on conservation agriculture is a recognition at some level that the way we have historically been doing things isn't sustainable. So that's a positive. There is a significant shift towards small grains now at a policy level, which we've never had before. And that National Foods have just commissioned their brand new small grains processing mill, which is really exciting. The First Lady herself came to open it. And there's lots to talk about it. And, small scale farmers now know that they can actually sell their small grains to GMB just as they have historically sold their maize. There's also a lot of growing interest in traditional foods and the agricultural produce that goes into those traditional foods. And that is a big change. When I first started, I was just so depressed by the fact that Zimbabwean consumers viewed traditional foods as something embarrassing and that they all wanted to move away from as quickly as possible. And it didn't matter who I was talking to, the attitude was always the same. And I remember a product that I produced was one, I was the first person to produce it, which I was so excited about, was Masao jam. I don't know, late 90s, long time ago. And I got this Masao jam onto a supermarket. My goodness, did I have to work hard to convince the supermarket buyer to put this. And there was an article in the local newspaper by a journalist in which he wrote an article saying, Zimbabwe has totally gone to the dogs. We are poorer than we've ever been. We're so poor, I even saw Masao jam on the supermarket shelf. Look, oh my goodness. But that has changed. That's actually changed now. So that's a huge thing. Okay, that's the picture. And then this one. Have you guys seen this? Yeah, isn't this amazing? So this was introduced a year ago, and it has become Dairy Board's top-selling product. It is their #1 product. That Cascade range has always done well for them, and this Baobab one has. They are now buying, I can't quite probably from confidentiality tell you exactly how much, but many, 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 many hundreds of Sakai Shatis are now making a living by supplying the fruit that go to her. It's significant volumes. In fact, I believe, because I'm also the chairman of the African Baobab Alliance, which is an association of all baobab producers across Africa, and I don't know of any buyer in the world that buys more than they do. So, and that's a local customer, and that's because they are meeting a consumer demand. And the reason that consumer demand is there is because Zimbabwean consumers are becoming aware that they need to change their eating habits and become a little bit healthier. I have to say, this product has got enormous amounts of sugar in it, and I can't say it's the most healthy, but it's definitely healthier than the fake orange one and the fake strawberry one and the fake chocolate one. So all that good news aside, we haven't changed everything yet. We are currently working on the next the National Development Strategy 1, and National Development Strategy 1 specifically has increased maize production as one of its direct objectives. So we are changing things, but slowly. Okay. So let's now shift the conversation to indigenous plants and where they fit in the agricultural mix today. Not talking about next year or in 5 years' time, but right now. So this was the Smallholder Agricultural Productivity Survey in 2017. I'm sure there's probably been one since then. This is just the one I happen to have access to at the time I prepared this presentation. But if you look down on the left, you can see there are some indigenous crops there. It's not every single one of them is exotic. So on the left, those are the exotics, obviously maize, rice, tobacco, cotton, blah, blah, blah. And then on the right, there are 5. There's sorghum, pearl millet, finger millet, cowpeas, and round nuts. Those that regularly appear. So it's not as if we are without indigenous plants in the agricultural system. But you can see, this is from a Zimvac, this was 2020, but I'm sure it would be the same, that by comparison with how many smallholder farmers grow maize, the number that grows sorghum or pearl millet or finger millet is very, very, very small. So they do exist, indigenous plants do exist in our agricultural system, but only at a tiny, tiny level. Again, this is by province, and the blue is maize, sorghum, pearl millet, finger millet. You can see in Mat North and Mat South is a little bit higher, especially on the sorghum side, which doesn't really surprise anyone, but it's still not nearly enough. And I'm sure every single one of you at some point has gone out to somewhere in rural Zimbabwe and looked at a field of desiccated, wilting maize and thought to yourself, why? Why did they plant that? When it's so obvious that that was going to be the result. It's going to die. So to me, I've always asked myself this question. Why do we do that? Why do we promote these? I'm not going to go in and answer that in detail because I think you guys have probably can figure it out yourself. But the paradox to me is this. These exotic crops that we focus on, which were not even known in Zimbabwe 150 years ago. Remember, 150 years ago, whatever we were growing was indigenous. There was nothing. Maybe maize had come in then. These exotic crops, they're drought prone. They are pest and disease prone because guess what? Our climate is very favorable to pests and diseases, and the pests and diseases love these crops that come in from other parts of the world that have not developed immunity to those pests and diseases. Because pests and disease, as you all know, is something to which plants will naturally evolve an immunity or protection over time, but they haven't been here long enough to do that. So they're very disease prone. Next, they require lots of inputs, lots of fertilizers. Most fertilizers are made by companies whose shareholders reside not in Zimbabwe. So when you buy fertilizer, it's not Zimbabwean economy that's benefiting. Also control. So when you buy seed that comes from an international seed company, you are giving away control of your food security to someone else, some other country. And it makes us uncompetitive. That is wheat farming in Ukraine. As you know, Ukraine is the biggest wheat farming country in the world. Guess what? Wheat comes from Ukraine. So they're quite good at it and they've had a lot of practice. Now, when we grow wheat in Zimbabwe, how can we possibly compete with them? Absolutely no chance. We will never. But you try and find me a single baobab tree in Ukraine. You won't. So if we're going to harvest baobab, we will wipe Ukraine clean. They don't stand a chance. But on this one, we lose every time. Also, these crops are making us unhealthy. So maize comes from Mexico. In Mexico, people who eat maize treat it in a particular way because maize has in it some anti-nutrients. It has some nutrients, but it has anti-nutrients. Anti-nutrients are things that inhibit the ability of your body to absorb the nutrients in it. Really bad anti-nutrients are poisons, and they actually can kill you. So the anti-nutrients in maize can be neutralized in a very simple way through a process of fermentation. So in Mexico, when you eat maize, you eat it as tapioca, which is fermented. We, on the other hand, in Zimbabwe, do not ferment it. We just take it and we crush it and then we cook it. And so those anti-nutrients stay there and they are killing us slowly, slowly, slowly. If you look at every generation of Zimbabweans over the last 120 years, each generation has got less healthy than the generation before it. And a significant driver of that is what we're eating, because it's not good for us. We've got ridiculously high levels of diabetes now and lifestyle diseases. Nobody in Zimbabwe had even heard of diabetes 30 years ago. And now it's common. And we saw it, COVID. Who was the ones that got COVID in Zimbabwe? The ones with diabetes, the ones with compromised immune systems. And what is it? It's what we eat, and what we eat is what we're growing. You can see that even the government-owned media is starting to recognize it. So it's like it is a big issue. This is Business Weekly. Sorry, it's a big topic for me, so I may have overkilled that one. Climate change. So the current agricultural model is making climate change worse. Not only are we making ourselves vulnerable to climate change, but we're actually making it worse because we use so much fertilizer. And fertilizer requires massive amounts of energy to produce it. And in fact, if you go to the next slide, there's a statistic here about 2.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions coming from fertilizer production. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. We don't need it. So I have very quickly summarized why I personally feel that indigenous plants should be playing a much higher role in the agricultural system. What I haven't done is gone through all the reasons I think that that's not the case, because I'm hoping you guys understand that. Fundamentally, it's because in the early period of colonization, we decided that we needed a few cash crops. And those cash crops were promoted to everyone, and they brainwashed all of us into thinking that this was the only model of agriculture. And we've got from there to here, and we are still not unbrainwashed. But the thing is, we have got so many indigenous plants in Zimbabwe that we've historically used. We've got all the knowledge. We've got all the experience here. Amazing book by a guy, which you can also pick up in Gweru, by the way, by a guy called Professor Michael Gelfand. Some of you might remember his name. He was a medical doctor in the 1980s who was also an anthropologist, who also studied traditional healers in Zimbabwe and medicinal plants that they use. And he interviewed a whole load of traditional healers about what plants they used in Zimbabwe. Now, we've got 6,000 species of plant. He found 500 of those 6,000 species were being used by traditional healers. 500. Now, you go into a pharmacy in Zimbabwe and see if you can even buy 5 Zimbabwean indigenous medicinal plants. And I tell you, you can't. I don't think you can buy any. You can buy echinacea, which comes from Europe, and you can buy a whole lot of other medicinal treatments that come from Europe, but you can't buy any from Africa, from Zimbabwe. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to quickly go through the 25 species that I selected in my lockdown project. And I'm just going to show them to you very quickly. Sorry, it's a bit of a, but you know, you might find them interesting. There's a very comprehensive report that I produced, which I would like to publish as a book, so it would be more accessible, but I don't have the money to publish it as a book. So if any of you have got deep pockets and you think it would be a nice thing, I think for about $15,000 or $20,000, we could make a really nice book and then everyone could see it. But basically what I did was I looked at 6,000 species, made a long list of 75 species, and then put them through a very rigorous selection process of ones that looked like they had the biggest potential to become smallholder crops. Not just me, a whole group of people, including people from the government, including people from FAO, etc. And we came up with 25 species, and these are the 25 species. I'm just going to go through them very quickly. So this is baobab. I think you all know it. We've already talked about it. I don't need to discuss it anymore. Aloe excelsa. So you know aloe vera probably. Aloe vera is a $1 billion a year industry focused in New Mexico and Arizona. Lots of farmers. There are farmers in Zimbabwe who grow aloe vera. Aloe excelsa has very similar compounds to aloe vera, but in some ways, medicinally, it's actually better. A friend of mine was driving on her own. She's an ecologist, and she was driving on her own from the Zambezi Valley up the escarpment near Guruve, coming out from Angwa. And she boiled the radiator in her car while she was driving, but she didn't know anything about mechanics. So she stopped the car on the side of the road and she opened the radiator cap, and all the boiling water came out straight into her face. And she collapsed on the ground. She was unconscious, totally burnt in her face. And she came around a few minutes. There was nobody around. She's all on her own. She opened her eyes and she was aware of this intense pain on her face. And she saw one of these plants growing in the bush. And she thought, aloe. So she crawled over to it and she tore some leaves off it and she put them onto her face. Eventually, she was picked up by some passers-by and taken to hospital here in Harare. When she got to the hospital and they peeled these things off, they said to her, don't know what that magic muti you put on your face was, but if you hadn't, you would not have a face. That's that aloe vera, aloe excelsa. It is the most incredible plant. There was a guy here called Professor Chagonda at the University of Zimbabwe. Some of you might know him in the late 90s, early 2000s, who had a skincare range based on that. But it's the most fantastic product. Used a lot in the treatment of diabetes, by the way. So not just for topical application, but also for internal use. Artemisia afra. Everyone got super excited about this plant during COVID because the story was it was the cure for COVID. You remember the Madagascan remedy that everyone talked about was based on this. So Artemisia annua is the cousin to this. And if you've ever taken coatum to cure your malaria, you'll know what a great medicine that is. This is the Zimbabwean equivalent, Artemisia afra. And it's a very, very, very remarkable plant. Weirdly, I have not found any vernacular names for it, even though it's quite well known and widely used. Okay, this one, Munga, I don't think I need to explain this one to you. Obviously, this is already a common food crop, but I couldn't not include this in my list. This is mashamba, or amajodo, as they call it in Matabeleland, the wild melon. This is actually the ancestor of the watermelon. In fact, it is a watermelon, but it's not sweet and it's not pink. If you open it up, the flesh is white and it's a little bit bitter. But it has lots of nutritional properties, and particularly in the seeds are full of oil. Now, if you go to Nigeria, you taste Nigerian food. All Nigerian food is drenched in a pinkish oil called ngusi, and that is made from this wild melon seed oil. 60,000 tons a year they produce of that. Think how much sunflower oil we produce a year in Zimbabwe. I mean, it's of that order of magnitude. And here's this plant which grows in Matabeleland. It doesn't, in fact, it grows all over the country. It doesn't require anything. You literally don't have to do anything. It just appears, there it is. Of course, if you nurture it, it will grow better. But in many places, it doesn't, nobody does anything. It just occurs. And we just look at it and forget about it. Sometimes you feed it to the cows. But this thing is a huge asset to us. I have a skincare product that's based on the oil from this. Most oils that you put on your skin, when you put them on your skin, they're quite oily and they leave a bit of an oily residue. This one, when you put it on your skin, it's bone dry. It moisturizes your skin, but you don't see any oil. So it doesn't feel, so if you touch it, you can't feel that there's oil in it. Nieve. This also was growing wild in Toko. I took that photograph. This has got many different names, but I think you all know it as an indigenous vegetable, very highly nutritious, and very, very, very easy to grow. 150 years ago, our forefathers ate it all the time, and your grandmother eats it, and sometimes when you go to visit her, you eat it. Some of you maybe buy it from Utsanzi's section in the supermarket, but most people don't eat it. And yet this is fantastically healthy, nutritious, and very cheap to produce. Gaka. So this one nearly made it into a world famous crop from Zimbabwe, because you see the names there. You've got the horned melon, horned cucumber, jelly melon, kiwano. Kiwano. Kiwano, little known fact, was the name given to this by a group of Zimbabwean farmers in New Zealand. So they left here in the 1980s, went to New Zealand, started farming, and one of them said, let's try that gaka. Brought the gaka there and said, no, we need a better name. So they called it Kiwano, and they registered the name Kiwano. So this is actually grown overseas as Kiwano by Zimbabwean farmers. And here, yeah, you know, I mean, everyone knows it. Most of us talk about it. Some of us like to regularly eat it, but we don't really promote it. But we promote my English cucumber. Explain that one to me. Okay, tiger nut. Yeah, sorry, that photo is a little bit hard to see. Fendi. Many of you would recognize this if I showed it to you. It's like a grass. But it's not the grain that we eat, it's the root tuber. So underneath the ground, there's this tuber. And the tuber has got a really delicious nutty flavor. And some people in Zimbabwe eat it, very few. But in other parts of the world, they go crazy for this thing. If you go to Spain, it is almost the national drink in southern Spain. It makes a milk. They make a milk out of this nut. They kind of shave it, and then they soak it in water, and then the juice that comes out is a kind of a milk, and that's what they drink. Tiger nut juice. Gio, I'm not going to talk about because you guys definitely know it. Marconi tea, said to impart lots of health benefits and mostly related to keeping your back straight. Sorry, just go back to that. Let's just keeping your back straight is a euphemism, but it's a very popular euphemism. So something that basically talking about virility, and if you can imagine, that's quite a big market. And this tea is traditionally consumed in this area. It's got a very nice flavor. And it's, I think, much more widely known now. In the 1990s, I also started the first brand of Marconi tea, and it didn't do terribly well, but now it's kind of starting to come. I started it because a lady came into my office at Sapphire, and she said, hi, Gus, I'm from Rusapi, and we have this indigenous bush tea in our area called Marconi tea. And I think it's fantastic. Why don't you try and produce it? So we did. And yeah, it was actually quite a successful product. We ran into a regulatory hurdle, which is that it's not approved for sale on export markets, but it is quite popular locally. This one, Inkunzane Nkulu, does not have a Shona name because it's not found in Mashona land. This grows on the ground and mostly underground, and it's a tuber. There are about 1,000 to 1,200 tons a year currently exported from Botswana. It's harvested by bushmen in very, very, very dry areas. You can imagine to them, it's huge income source. Incidentally, I have about 150 videos about plants up on YouTube. And the video that I did on this plant is by far the most popular I've ever produced randomly. I don't know why. But this is a really interesting medicinal plant used in the treatment of arthritis and rheumatism. In Germany, you can buy this on the National Health System. It's an approved phytomedicine. Murara, Ilala palm. Ilala palm, why is it called Ilala palm or Murara? Because it makes a wine, and after you drink the wine, you rara. But it's not a great tasting wine, but it's very popular and widespread. But there are lots of other things you can do with this. The leaves are used to make baskets, and basketry, as you know, is quite a big industry for many people living in rural areas. The seeds are also used to make buttons and other things called vegetable ivory. Significant commercial potential to this plant. In other parts of the world, of course, palm trees are commercially grown and widely used, but not for us in Zim. Zumbani tea, that's another herbal tea, which I think you guys all know because anyone who was here during COVID heard of Zimbani. Magical, magical stuff. Fundi Chimuka, you probably also now heard of. This wasn't much known before, but it's become quite common now, quite well known. And actually, I've got a craft beer flavored with this, which is very popular, very tasty. I think you're going to see this one appearing a lot more in future. It hasn't yet been cultivated. Nobody's cultivating it at the moment, but I think it will be. It's quite widespread. There's quite a lot of it, but obviously the sooner we start cultivating it, the quicker we avoid any issues on sustainability. So you probably don't know this, but everyone in the world that consumes rice consumes one species of rice called Oryza sativa, which is known as white rice or Asian rice. But this African rice, mpunga, Oryza glaberrima, is the ancestor of the rice that's used. This is the original one. And if you know it and you've tasted it, you know this is much tastier than the other one, but it's much less produced. But historically, if you came to Zimbabwe 300 years ago, actually, this was probably the staple starch that we all ate. And it's been almost forgotten since then. Hacha or chakata. This fruit, I think, is quite widely known, and you've probably seen the nuts on sale now. It makes a beautiful oil that can be used in the cosmetics industry or the food industry. The nuts are quite tasty, the fruit very tasty, and these trees produce a lot of them. If you go at the right time of year to an area where there's hacha, you will find the ground is absolutely carpeted in these things. And at the moment, we are very, very, very underutilizing them. Go. Okay, this one you probably don't know, or most of you, not many of you will know this. The Livingston potato, so called because David Livingstone, when he first came across this, said it's a potato, which it obviously isn't. But it is a vegetable that's traditionally quite widely known and widely consumed. That's almost forgotten now, but very, very, very healthy, very good for you, and not bad tasting. Tsenza. Mongongo, this is another nut that comes from Matabeleland, and nice digitate leaf. The tree produces a lot of them. These nuts were traditionally consumed by sand bushmen to keep them going during the dry season. The elephants love them. There's also a fruit. It makes an oil. Oil is widely used. Just to mention the oil thing, every single cosmetic product that you ever put on your skin has oil in it as the basis. The two things that go into cosmetics are water and oil. Oil is what makes it kind of sticky and foamy and frothy, and the water is the bulk. So we use a lot of oil in Zimbabwe. We just don't know that we use it. Most of the oil that we use comes from underground petroleum. We don't produce petrol in Zimbabwe, so it's all imported. Our top skincare product in the country is petroleum jelly, Vaseline. That's what most people, mothers, put on their children, and it's made from petrol, which isn't terribly good for you, and we don't produce it here. But this also makes a beautiful oil. And let me tell you, this is much better to put on your baby than petroleum, but this thing falls to the ground and rots because we don't know it. And this is a wasted opportunity. There are thousands and thousands of tons of mongongo oil that are currently unutilized in Zimbabwe. Marula, I think you've started to hear about this one. The government has a big, totally unused marula factory down near Rutenga. But there's great opportunity from this one, both the fruit and the oil and the nuts. Another one, Natal mahogany. This thing, you've probably seen this. They're all over Harare. They're all over the country. They grow very easily. Big, beautiful tree with these lovely, big, fat red seeds that are full of oil, like 45% oil content. Now, the cheapest plant oil in the world, so the cheapest oil in the world is petroleum. The cheapest plant oil in the world is palm oil. And palm oil has significant environmental problems because palm oil, rainforest is cleared to produce palm oil. So the demand is there for alternative high-yielding oils that are not palm oil. And this is our Zimbabwean palm oil. That's not palm oil. Trachea emetica, it's very, very, very easy to grow, and it produces huge amounts of seed. 200, 300, 400 tons, 200, 300, 400 kilos of seed per tree per year. In Mozambique in the 1960s, they used to export 40, 50,000 tons of trachea oil to Portugal to make soap. Janji, I think you all know that. I'm not even going to explain that one. My favorite Nemo bean, which we've just about got approved for export to the European Union. It's been a long process. Here's a bean that grows really easily and doesn't require inputs and is very good for you. Make you a little bit windy at times, but that's an acceptable price to pay. It's very nutritious. And of course, its sister, which is the cowpea, Nyemba, which I think you all know. And then the sour plum, Nengeni, which I'm sure many of you recognize. This one is found in the wild in very low quantities, but you can farm it very easily and grow it in high quantities. And there's a lot of demand for the seed because it produces a beautiful cosmetic oil. The fruit is also tasty if you have a high threshold of tolerance for sour things. And then finally, this one, the Masao, which is not technically indigenous, but it's been around in Zimbabwe for so long that we basically consider it indigenous because it's been here for 400 or 500 years. Large areas of the Zambezi Valley that are covered in this. Many communities around the mid-Zambezi area that survive half the year of selling this and spend the other half of the year getting drunk on it. But it is actually a wonderful plant, very, very productive. So those are the plants that I have shown that I selected, the 25 species. And I know what you're all going to say. Gus, this all makes lots of sense, but we're the Market Linkages Association. We're here to create market linkages, and obviously there are no markets for these products. And I know it's true, and I'm not denying that. It is true. I know because I've sunk a lot of my own money into this business. But just because there aren't markets today doesn't mean there can't be markets. It's a bit like saying, oh, you know, I want to go, I want to go solar, but there's no solar suppliers near me. It's like, yeah, but that's a technical problem. Like that can easily be changed. The fact is, we've all known now. We used to be very resistant to solar, but now we've realized it's of course, it makes total sense. So now we're all going to it. And it's the same with these. Once we agree it makes sense, we can do it. Of course, we can do it. This is actually a supermarket in Harare in 2010. Those of you who were there will recognize it. But this is me saying, this is how many Baobab products there were on the supermarket shelf in 2010. And this is how many there are now. These are all different products. And the next one. And I can go on and show you. These are all products that come from Baobab, which have all been developed in the last 10 years because somebody said, let's create a market for this. So just because there's no market now doesn't mean there can't be a market. If we all agree that it's a good idea, and then we all focus on trying to build the market, we can do it really quickly. And I'll show you the example of that. Let's go on. Go on. It's this. That's rooibos tea. Oh, think about rooibos tea. Rooibos tea is a bush tea. Comes from South Africa. Lucky for them. It only comes from South Africa, so they don't have any competition, but that's neither here nor there, really. Now, what did they do? Because 50 years ago, nobody in the world had ever heard of rooibos tea. Literally nobody. What did they do? Well, they created this organization, the Rooibos Council. And the Rooibos Council was a mixture of people from industry, people from the government, people from the NGOs, people from the research community. And these groups got together and they said, let's make rooibos tea huge. And they did. Let's go. And they sponsor all this research around rooibos and what does rooibos do and all the health benefits of rooibos. They got rooibos listed internationally as a safe food. They got it into the EU. And now you can see rooibos is massive. They produce 20,000 tons of rooibos tea every year in South Africa, 12 or 13,000 tons of which are exported. It's a massive global commodity because a group of people got together and they said, hey guys, it would really benefit us if we could create demand for rooibos. So the point I'm making, and this is my final point, is that all of this can be done. I think indigenous plants have got a huge role to play in the future of our agricultural system. I don't think that's even an option. I actually think it's an imperative because drought is going to become so common and so frequent that we're going to say, of course, it's the only thing we can do. But we shouldn't sit back and wait for it to happen. Let's drive the process. Let's take ownership. Let's control it and let's make it happen. And if we all do it together systematically, we can make it happen much more quickly and much more effectively. I don't think there's ever been a better time to do it. Now is the time when Zimbabwean consumers are starting to think about healthy food. Now is the time when Zimbabwean farmers are starting to think about yet another drought and what do we do differently. So from both the demand side and the supply side, the time now is right. But ultimately, and that's obviously a quote that I'm sure you all recognize from Bob Marley, ultimately, no one else is going to do this for us. We are the ones that have to do it. So if we want to transform our agricultural production system to integrate indigenous plants all throughout the system, it's up to us. It's up to you guys, these people right here in this room right now to make that happen. And that's why I hope you're listening to me. And that's what I hope will be the takeaway lesson from this talk.
Cool. Thanks, Gus.
Just quick to mention the Good Food Festival tomorrow and Saturday, well, particularly Saturday at the Harare Gardens. This is all about indigenous foods and food plants. So please go and check it out. It's really good fun. There's a lot going on there. I think you'll be blown away by the innovation, which is the 12th year or something that we've done this festival. And it's changed. You cannot believe how different it is from when we started it.
Great. Any questions for Gus? Or comments? So which did you say you ranked them? 1, 2, 3. What?
No, I didn't rank them.
Okay.
No. I ranked them compared to the other 75. So these were the top 25 out of the 75.
Okay.
I'd have to do a lot more to rank them one against another.
Okay.
Yeah.
And ranking, when we think of agriculture, we think of row cropping and such. Are you mainly talking about wild collection, or are we talking about planting fields of these things, or maybe both?
Well, you might talk about row cropping as being the only way that you think of agriculture, but to most people in the world, agriculture is a much more holistic thing. And wild harvesting plays a part in that, row cropping plays a part in that, and other sort of mixed agricultural production systems also play a part in that. I'm not prescribing that these things should be grown in rows or harvested from the wild. I think that's something that agronomists and experts can figure that one out later. All I'm saying is that these plants offer something that is an opportunity that we're currently not exploiting that I believe we should exploit. I'm not going to prescribe how we do that.
Right. Anything from the, yes, sir.
Why is it a lot of businesses are not seeing the opportunity to get into this, into maybe processing these products? Then we can look at demand. Then there's a business is creating demand, maybe for as opposed to, or maybe taking lessons from the South African case for those.
So I'm going to answer that very simply, and I would have answered it differently 20 years ago, because at that time I had not myself been directly involved in business. 20 years and I got all my fingers and all my toes burnt many times. Now I can answer it. I think we do not have an environment in Zimbabwe that is supportive of innovation. It's extremely hard to do even the most simple of businesses in Zimbabwe. So the innovators are left way out there on the very extreme edge. And I think if you just leave the private sector, especially in a climate as tough as ours, they will, like water, always follow the path of least resistance. I also think that you can change that. I think there are ways that you can switch the water from going down there to going there. And it's not hard to do, but someone needs to do it. And I don't mean someone in the private sector, I mean someone in the public sector. Someone has to recognize that this is worthwhile. Think about it from a donor's point of view. You are buying food aid. You are spending millions of dollars a year on feeding people because the agricultural system has failed. Now, if you were to put a little bit of subsidy into a company and say to them, hey guys, why don't you go and innovate with this ingredient, which would create a demand for that? You could change so much for such a little cost, but that's not the way donors think. So I don't think you can blame the private sector. I think the private sector have got a tough enough time in Zim as it is. I think it's about the public sector and the donors being a little bit more creative with the way that they spend their money to try to encourage this shift.
So there's a question here, Gus. This crop that you mentioned, Nieve,
Yep.
has it been commercially produced at all in Zimbabwe?
It is sold. You can buy it in the supermarket. So there's a little sort of section of the supermarket that focuses on indigenous fruits. And in there, you'll find dried nieve from probably 3 or 4 different brands, but very, very, very small quantities. I don't think it's ever been grown by a commercial farmer ever in the history of the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
So of all the products that you've been involved in the commercialization of, which would be the most successful, do you think?
I mean, it would depend on how you would define success, whether it's the most farmers involved, the most money that's being generated, or
the
whatever.
volumes moved, maybe.
Well, I mean, the volumes, probably the easiest ones have been some of the grains. You know, we've managed to achieve, with relatively small amounts of investment, achieve big changes in the volumes of the grains. I mean, probably the poster child for Zimbabwe is going to be a baobab, because it's one that we started from scratch. There was 0, and now you've got 1,500 or 2,000 tons a year of it. It's still small, but it's, you know, it's picking up. I think the one that has attracted the most policy attention recently has been the marula, which has obviously had some quite high profile, though not terribly successful, but quite high profile investments made. And I think in terms of growth potential, marula's got enormous potential. I think we're going to see a lot happening there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did I see amaranth amongst that list?
You didn't see amaranth, but amaranth is another one that I've been involved in. So amaranth has traditionally been consumed as a food plant, as a edible vegetable in Zimbabwe. But in most parts of the world, it's better known as a grain. So as BIZ, we started working on it as a grain, and now it's doing quite well. It's in quite a lot of products, and I mean, amaranth grain is extremely drought resistant. It's a wonderful product, very nutritious, pretty easy to produce. So
Okay.
yeah, I think you'll see a lot more of that.
All
That
right.
was just a slight switch.
Cool. So I think there's one more question.
Yes, the one. About what are the challenges with the export market? Because if surely our there was on high demand outside is maybe our tobacco, things might be different.
So that's what we had to do with Baobab. So when we started, I told you the story of the Masao jam. When we started with Baobab 20 years ago, there was no Zimbabwean that would ever pay for Baobab. They literally wouldn't. I used to eat that when I was a child, herding cattle for free, and now you're going to sell it to me in a supermarket. You have to be joking. So we only focused on the export market, and it was hard. It's expensive. And now I'm trying to create a market in a country that I don't know, with a consumer that I don't know, who's never heard of this product. And it's also, by the way, illegal in their country because it hasn't been through the regulatory hurdles. So it was a very big task. I would much rather we didn't have to do that. At the time, we did because we couldn't sell it locally. But now, if I was doing Baobab again today, you can see our biggest customer is Dairy Board. It's not some export buyer in the UK. It's actually a local company. So if I was doing it again now, I wouldn't bother with that export thing. I'd say, let's develop the local market, and then we can develop the export market, because I think things have changed.
Cool. So just thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. That was really fascinating. Maureen, would you like to come up? So Maureen Vere has been passionate about cowpeas. I think she was telling me since 2011, but it was only a bit later on, 2016-17, that she established the business in the processing of this crop. Maureen, over to you.
So much.
Oh, you're supposed to pin this to.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Are you going to be able to see if I stand here?
Yeah.
All right. Let's try. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also, I must stand here. Hey. Okay. All right. Can you please go back to the first? So I'm just going to say cowpea, vegan and vegetarian products, plant-based, made nutritiously good. Next, please. So is this the next superfood, or is it the next big thing, you might ask? So I would like to let you know first about the company that is doing this kind of thing. It is called Verega Private Limited, and it is headquartered here in Zimbabwe. It is registered here, and it has also got a few international credentials. It is a women empowerment oriented and innovation, research and development SME. It is a green company, and most of its raw materials are made by or grown by small scale farmers who are all local. And it is a farm to fork intervention. It is also crops grown under climate smart agriculture. I would just like to go back to innovation and research development, what you were saying, innovation. But a lot of people do not have time to innovate. It needs somebody who is right at the grassroots, like I am, and then it goes up, because most companies do not have the time, and usually, since they are already commercial, most of them are looking at profits. So this is just one comment I can make. Next, please. So I am Maureen. I'm the one who founded the company. I'm born and bred in Zimbabwe. I worked for various organizations, JB Management Services, UNHCR, TOR, that's Transportation of Returnees, during the Mozambican War, GIZ, Welthungerhilfe, just to name a few. And then I was then established Rural Women's Advancement Trust, short RWATS, which was to empower rural women and women former commercial farm workers. So this is where everything started. Verega is a spin-off of Rural Women's Advancement Trust. Then our achievement so far was that in 2018, we won the FemBioBiz competition, which is female-led bio-businesses in Zimbabwe, and also in SADC. Then in 2021, we also got a recognition, top 10 in the World Food Innovators Competition. Then the passionate that I have that made me do this kind of thing was to assist the underprivileged. If we all look at cowpeas, it is known in Zimbabwe as a poor man's food. And this is what most of our women were just, usually when you go to rural women, you ask them, what have you grown this year? They will tell you, oh, I've put chibagi, I put tobacco, I put, those are commercial. And then and as always, tunyemba, I've just put a little bit of cowpeas, So it was already like a problem with the underprivileged as well, but they always grow cowpeas. So this has been a 12-year journey of excitement, joy, surprises, and at times tears. And then my passion is also dedicated to the development and growth of myself and also assisting everybody within my proximity. Next, please. So cowpeas, the nutritional values and why it's better. First and foremost, it's drought resistant. And we are developing some strains that are more tolerant to the heat, the higher temperatures we are getting, and new breeds. You will hear a bit more on the more detailed presentation. So it's also rich in nutrients. It's protein packed. It is good for the health conscious people, individuals, families, organizations, groups. And then it's dietary diversification seekers and plant-based food lovers. Next, please. Our target group are vegans, vegetarians, nutrition booster for those in need, like the malnourished. It is plant-based meal lovers food as well. And then alternative to those alternative food seekers. Next, please. What is the big deal about cowpeas? Okay, it is a variety for your company or yourself or whatever. Protein packed, rich in iron, zinc, vitamin A, and B6. But we're also now biofortifying other nutrients like calcium that we think are required at the moment. Then it's got, of course, great nutritional values. These are plant-based optional meal and also a meat substitute. Next, please. So first I introduce, I'm the founder and director of Verega is a green innovation and research and startup that is now scaling. Next, please. So cowpeas, our topic here will be cowpeas as a future global food. What is cowpeas? Most of you might ask. It is a protein and nutrient dense legume that is indigenous to Africa. It is small in size, has a distinct taste and easy to prepare for consumption. It is widely grown by women, small-scale farmers as a rain-fed side crop for dietary supplementation. It is also drought resistant, does not require much fertilization because it makes its own nitrogen. So a lot of our people, smallholder farmers, cannot afford fertilizers. So we use this as a food security initiative in nutrition, but also as a soil fixation crop, because as you know, because they cannot afford fertilizers, their soils are also now very, very degraded. Now, Verega's value chains are, we have a staff complement of 12 using clean energy and good manufacturing practices. The company processes cowpeas into globally acceptable forms of modern day consumptive methods. The company produces things like sausages, burgers, dried cowpea mince. Now, we find that to just give people cowpeas, the reaction you always get, like, I don't eat cowpeas. And in our society, people will always say, like, let's say you're arguing when you were young, it was like, oh, go home and eat your southern cowpeas, because it was a low food that most poor people ate. So we decided that if we process the cowpeas into globally acceptable forms, we can reach a wider market, not just in Zimbabwe, but in the region and also globally, because our young people now, these are the kind of things that they like. So if we give it to children, they love burgers. But if it is nutritiously good, then it's okay. Then for hard to reach areas, we then decided, well, why don't we do it as mince? If we pack it, it can go to rural areas, it can go to disaster areas, it can go to, war zones, it can, next please. Then the distribution of our, products is done through, things like supermarkets. Although now we've got just a few supermarkets, then we've food fairs, etc. But unfortunately, we can't attend on Saturday because we already had other commitments outside Zimbabwe. And our packaging is ranged in from small trays to bulk packs, because we also have a few boarding schools that are getting our sausages. We market our products as affordable options for protein, and the sales between January and that was in 2021. Sorry, it was supposed to come off. Our target market, of course, is vegans. Although in Zimbabwe we do not have many vegans, we find that if we supply hotels, and this is where usually they get visitors who are vegans. Vegetarians, yes, because we have religious groups that sometimes Fridays or just before Easter, they all stop eating meat. Then the health conscious citizenry, of course, those seeking dietary diversification, and the low income earners. So we also have prototypes that are still yet to be perfected. We are doing an instant cereal. We're also doing a sweet snack, which we think is also going to be very good, because I went also with a few samples to some of the Tigray, where we gave to children. It might be sweet, but it's also protein packed and nutrient packed. So it is also going to target a certain market. And we're also trying to do cowpeas in brine for not just supermarkets, hotels, and also those hard to reach areas. We're also making other products, which I cannot say now because we are still, our food scientists are still perfecting them, but we got many, more than 8. Now we have our catchphrase is nutritiously good, because we believe that our products are packed with nutrition. Next, please. So our mission as a company is to avail an affordable protein supplement to the disadvantaged citizenry. A lot of our people cannot afford meat. Zimbabwe, our main source of protein comes from beef. So now beef is so expensive, and many people would rather, if we present sausages on the market, we find that when you eat it at times, you can't even tell that it's not meat. We also want to promote a pulse protein to the health-conscious citizenry and the malnourished, to promote the consumption of cowpeas globally, and to cover the gap of animal and bird proteins shortages. As we all know that our population is getting bigger by the year, less and less room for animals and birds to be looked after. So we can use this, promote this kind of protein. We also, our sustainable goal number 12, responsible consumption and production. So our vision is to, of course, to bring accessibility of an affordable protein source to the world and help meet its food requirements despite COVID-19, the pandemic that we have just passed, climate change, and of course, population growth. Now, the production of cowpeas currently in our country, it's here in Zimbabwe. Our company is working in collaboration with a local NGO, the NGOs, 2 Rural Women's Advancement Trust and 3 more, and he has managed to organize smallholder farmers into a thriving cowpea supply chain. We have a total of plus or minus 1,200 farmers, although now we've got a new program we are going into with MASAP, where we've taken another 200. So we can say we've got 1,400 farmers now to grow the crop sustainably using best agricultural practices, resulting in the current output of 18,000 tons. Now, when I say 18,000 tons, I'm not saying that it's all coming to the company, but when we look at most of these farmers, we've got 1,200 farmers, but we found that each farmer has got another behind her, maybe another 50 farmers growing cowpeas as well, although they do not bring it to the market. But at the moment, what we've calculated within this basket, we are producing as a country 18,000 tons at the moment. The farmers we work with, 98% female, 40% under the age of 30 years, which we are very happy about, because if we are to meet global food requirements, we need more younger people to go into cowpea farming. These farmers work in clusters of 100, and we expect them to promote to produce about 30,000 tons of cowpea by 2025. Thereafter, we expect an output increase of 30% per annum as we increase grower numbers, input support, farmer training, and incentivization. Now, next, please. With this approach of having our farmers use minimal and meaningful cropping for sustainability method, we expect them to have their incomes increased 200-fold by 2025. Thereby building the growers' lives back better post-pandemic. Because a lot of them were also affected by the pandemic. As you know, everything just shut and things were in the crops were in the field, and cowpea easily gets weevilled. So a lot of their crop was weevilled. So the table below is just showing how we're going to get to 30,000 tons by now. Then the cowpea research and development. To strengthen the process of turning cowpeas into a global food, Verega is in a partnership with a UK university and is embarking on development of 3 highly productive cowpea varieties, like I've mentioned before. And these varieties will be more tolerant to higher temperatures. We are currently experiencing and are expecting to rise further. Under the same partnership with the UK university, and now including a Zimbabwean university. Next slide, please. And now including a Zimbabwean university, we are introducing also 2 agri-tech technologies that will help our farmers to realize better yields. And these are so these technologies will help amend and improve the farmers' soil nutrients and water holding capacities. They're both made from natural resources found within the our forests here in Zimbabwe, making our R&D a biodiversity initiative, and also the farmers are going to realize more income because by sourcing those other raw materials from the wild, they'll also get an income. So we using this people and planet approach to this R&D will result in smart farming that is environmentally friendly and sustainable as we move towards commercializing cowpea farmers. Now, my conclusion is we are looking for like-minded persons to put our company's products across different regions of the world where plant-based protein is very much appreciated, preferred, and sought after. Should you be interested or need more information, you may contact on the details named below. Thank you, Ndatinda Siyabonga.
Any comments or questions for Maureen?
Yes.
Thanks. And going back to what Gus said about maybe it's not the right thing to be developing export markets, but to be focusing on the local market.
Yes.
I mean, I'd love to be able to see some chickpea sausages or chickpea burgers, but I've not seen anywhere in our market. So I mean, it would be good to how can you get them into the local supermarket if they really are a cost-effective, low-cost protein for people.
At the moment, why we were not putting 100% into supermarkets is because we didn't have a factory. If you want anything on the supermarket shelves, you have to have a proper facility that is regulated with it. So now we are very happy to say MASAP is now helping us to establish that factory, and we are hoping that August 2024 we will have these products on our shelves. What we are doing at the moment is we normally just take orders. Like we supply a few boarding schools, but we supply with caution. We had a mini factory at the farm, but because of the past events, we were sort of stabbed and attacked, and so we have closed it at the moment. But if you want some things to taste, we can do for you. You just apply online, reach us. And also what I also mentioned is that some of our biggest customers are a certain religious group. So we also make them according your products according to your specifications. Like we know the Unity Society, the mainly vegetarian. Some of them, they say do masala for us, masala flavors, and we do that. But now we are working on the factory in Mashonaland East, and we are hoping that we'll get our certifications by April next year, and we'll start processing just like any other company and put them on the shelves. But that is not stopping us from asking also the other food producers to join in. But what we have also realized is that in Zimbabwe, looking from other things like, Mazepi, it started with one company. It was, the snacks. Yeah. And also the things like soya chunks. It started with one company. And they want to see how it is going off the supermarket shelves. So we are hoping that when we put things on the supermarket shelves next year, also other companies will notice, and they will also now go into cowpea production, and it will be good not just for but for the farmers as well. And also one thing I learned from Gus, that although we have robbed in Imkambo, I don't know whether you know it, with Dewa, and the Agricultural Marketing Authority, we should also now have like the Rooibos Council. We should now also have the cowpea, but it takes time. And once we have all these products that we've is innovated from cowpeas. We now have to work backwards now to see if we want to move 2 steps forwards. When we go backwards now, we are going to the farmer. We have to do the proper way. The fields have to be inspected. The factory has to be inspected. So we hope that after 2024, we'll leapfrog the cowpea appreciation in Zimbabwe. And then, because in our country, we are lucky. People just need to see a few people doing it and they all catch up.
So amongst your smallholder farmers, have you noticed a change in attitude towards cowpea now that they're actually making a bit of money out of it?
Yes, I didn't quite explain why, how we ended up doing sausages, because we started as Rural Women's Advancement Trust, and we were introduced in 2011 by the late Dave Law at our church celebration center, the agricultural department. They said, if you've got somewhere where we can train you about conservation agriculture, we can come to you and we train. So I went to, it was Sandy then who was heading it. Told Sandy, I've got a group of women who I would like them to be trained in conservation agriculture. So Dave Law came and the women were trained. But when we were putting mulch, termites were attacking the mulch. So at the food festival, I think it was in 2016, on the Friday there was a meeting where people were sitting and were chatting about. So some lady, I can't remember which organization. She asked, "Are any of you having problems with conservation agriculture?" So I told her that we were having problems with mulch, because for women to mulch every year, it is quite hard. So she said to me, use live mulch, use beans or use cowpeas. So I looked, I said, beans, we have to go into the shop and buy them, and that's more money. So I decided, well, every woman has got cowpea seed in there, in the seed basket. So we started using cowpeas, and they were, so the women, the end of 2016, they harvested a lot. And they said to me, hey, what are we going to do? We just boil these cowpeas and eat them, like, and or we mix a multi-grain meal in Takura. So we then decided to do the food processing course that is offered by Minister of Women's Affairs. So they gave us a trainer. The trainer came to the women, and they started preparing fritters and how you can eat them with rice, put tomato, onion, blah, blah, blah. And it was so when one woman was rolling, she couldn't quite roll the fritter. She rolled it the other way, and everybody said a sausage. So the trainer, she is also very smart. She then they rolled it in egg and flour. They fried it, and they started eating it, and they loved it. They started experimenting more. So she came to me. She says, "Ma'am, these women, they love the sausage so much. Every time I go there, they're just talking about the cowpea sausage." Then she said, "Why don't you think of going into business for cowpea sausages?" So I said to her when I was sitting, I said, "Okay, yeah, that's a good idea." But inside, I said, "She is mad. How can I go into business with this kind of thing?" And then, strangely, in March 2017, there was an advert in the paper, in the Herald, and it said SADC and Botswana Innovation Hub are looking for indigenous crops that are ready for commercialization, at the commercialization stage. And I said, let me try the sausage. And then I kept asking, shall I not? And then 3 days before the deadline, I made an application. As we sent it online, and then the reply came as ZimDef. So I said, ZimDef? But he's saying SADC is saying Botswana Innovation Hub. They said, we've received your proposal. 2 weeks later, it was, congratulations, you're going next stage. Then the next stage was training now, and things that we didn't know. It's strange again, it was saying biofisa. Finland Minister of Foreign Affairs and South African government. So I was saying, how does this thing, but I was just going and we were learning. Then we did another final proposal. We admitted again, and so we went in. They said we were, going to receive R1 million to now perfect our products. So that's where everything started. So it is something that we went in by chance, and it came from, the grassroots, the women in the. This is why we always have to call this a women-led initiative.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you. And I believe there's a number of biofortified cowpea varieties around. Are you using those at all?
They're owned by the Crop Breeding Institute. We haven't really tried them yet because what is big on the market now is CBC2. And this year, under the MASA project, we are going to, when we tried CBC4, because we took the varieties and we planted them, we realized that CBC4 is what we wanted, and also CBC6. Now we are using only 3 of the varieties. I understand now they've got 9. But what we have gone and done is the Durham University, our UK partner, they'll be here next week. They are now also roping them in under a new consortium where we are going to take those varieties and and then also other indigenous, because what we then realized is that there were lots of varieties within women's seed baskets that we didn't know. So what we're doing is to ask our women members to just bring what they have. We take those seeds together with Crop Breeding Institute here in Zimbabwe, and we go to Durham. We then want to bring out what we are looking for as a company, what we think is best for the project, the products that we are producing, and they have agreed, because the varieties that they have, it was usually the personal breeders just breeding them, but without clearly thinking of what the market would require.
Wow. Okay. Cool. I don't know, any more questions or comments? Yes, Tony? Is there a question here? Okay. One moment.
Can you dry the sausage?
Yes, you can. You can do anything with it. Yeah.
It is like a beef sausage.
Skin or
Yeah, what we did, we then looked for. Luckily, when this call came from SADC, this trainer, her neighbor, was retrenched from Qualcomm. So he says, so we asked how do we perfect this now that we got this funding to perfect our for commercialization. He says, don't worry, I'll do it for you. He did it for us. We then looked for vegetarian casing. And we cased it, and it's coming out. The only problem that we have, we sure that also in the UK we are going to get some on how to bind it, is that it's still slightly brittle. Although I use other things, I use like the calabash cucumber, if you know Imapudzi, is another product, and also pumpkin seed. We find that it's still slightly brittle, so we have to also look for maybe a gluten-free binder to. Yeah, this is why I'm now saying we are working backwards, because we to perfect it. So, but and one good thing there, then I was told by one guy to say, you shouldn't worry too much about the casing in Zimbabwe, because all of it is now artificial casing, which is also still good enough. It's made from soya. Mm.
Okay. So from Orlean at Christian Aid, she first expressed appreciation to you, Gus, but to Maureen as well. Interesting and great stuff you have done with cowpea. How are farmers dealing with the post-harvest handling of cowpea, because it deteriorates quickly? And I think you said it's very prone to weevil damage.
Yeah. What we have been doing as a company is that we take it quickly from them and we process it there and there. before we store it. So now what we are doing under the MASA project, we at the factory, the new factory, we are going to, it's going to be at Marondera. It's already a cold place. We want to establish, to develop underground storage system, which uses natural cooling. So we are going to store them there. Some of them we cook them and dry them. Others we crush, but I don't like crushing too much because it's they will then lose flavor. So this is what we've been doing, been processing them as soon as they come, and we keep them as processed.
Great.
They don't get weevils. Yeah,
Thank you.
because at times when I put them, like when we are doing research like it, you find that even in the field you start seeing weevils walking out.
So I think you could probably consider weevils as extra protein as well.
That's what I told these other guys. I said, I just eat them. I eat them because after all, they're eating cowpeas.
For those that don't know, MASAP is an SDC funded program being implemented both here in Zimbabwe and in Zambia. Anyway, Maureen, thank you so much, and to Gus for a really, I think, interesting afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maureen.
Yeah. So I encourage people to eat cowpeas.
Yes.
Tell everybody they are nutritious, they're highly tasty. They are
I think you'll have some people contacting you because your company is offering a great opportunity to development partners who are looking for something that is climate smart
Yeah.
to produce. So I don't think you'll run short